Hello there, friend. Welcome back to Sorry What. Make sure you're comfortable with a cup of your favorite drink and let us begin today's story. Beth Aldrich had no idea why she was bearing her soul to a man she was certain she had never met. Maybe it was his deep blue eyes that looked so caring. Perhaps the few flecks of gray hair made her think of him as wise. Or maybe it was simply that she was quite certain she would never see him again. Honestly, she couldn't recall the beginning of the conversation, but here she was, a 31-year-old happily married for 6 years wife telling some stranger her deepest, darkest secrets. "I cheat on my husband," she said barely above a whisper. This drew a quizzical smirk from her new friend, maybe even a knowing glance that meant, "I don't believe you, but I'll play along." "Oh really?" he replied out loud. "Do tell, Mrs. Aldrich." "Well, it's not often and only with the same couple of men. I mean, I'm not a slut who ducks around with just anybody." "Tell me more. Is this because your husband is a wimp who gets off on your disrespect and humiliation?" "No, never. Not at all. Mac is all man. He's strong and accomplished. He'd never stand for it if he knew what was happening. Perhaps he neglects you or even worse abuses you in some way." No, nothing like that. He's a loving and kind husband. We enjoy intimacy, both emotional and physical, all the time." She giggled at herself as she thought about sharing even the smallest portion of her married sex life with a stranger. "Then, if you don't mind me asking, since you brought it up, why would you cheat on a man who seems to love, support and provide for you so well?" "No, I don't mind since you are a total stranger and I'll never see you again. I need to cut loose every once in a while. I teach high school English composition, and I'm well respected by my peers, students, and the community in general. Every so often, I need to be a bad girl. I need a man to take me and use me as his duck toy. I don't want hugging, or cuddling, or pillow talk. I want to be plowed and used like a common whore." Suppressing a smile, the stranger continued to pry. "Why not just tell hubby what you need? If he's the man you describe, I'm sure he'd be happy to play with you when you have a fantasy." "Oh my, I could never," Beth replied, even blushing a bit. "Mac is the best ever. I can't wait to start having kids with him. I think we're going to begin trying right after Christmas. He's my knight in shining armor, he'll be the father of my children, and the person I respect more than anything. I could never ask him to bend me over and make me his witch." So, the stranger began leaning in a bit further and lowering his voice. "Who are the lucky men who get to use you like a whore when you get these urges?" "Dr. Davison and Coach Glenn. Dr. Davison is the principal at my school, and Coach Glenn is the head football coach. I was only doing coach, but Dr. Davison caught us, and the price for his silence was a piece of the action. A piece of my mouth, peach, melons, and kitty." Again, she blushed, wondering how she could say such things so flippantly to this heretofore unfamiliar man. For the first time the man appeared slightly troubled. A look crossed his face that was a combination of surprise, angst, and perhaps even sorrow. "Well, it has been quite interesting and enlightening talking with you, Mrs. Aldrich. Perhaps I'll see you again sometime and we can continue our chat." The man rose from his chair and made his way to the door. Okay, sure. See you around. Hey, by the way, what is your name?" She never got an answer. He was gone. My, that was odd, Beth thought to herself. She then picked up her phone and hit the button she thought was speed dial for her mom. She got her sister-in-law in Poughkeepsie. 3 weeks later, Mac Aldrich was sitting in the back of O'Malley's pub in the center of Sterling, Virginia, about 20 minutes from his home in Reston. It was close enough to not arouse the suspicions of his invited guests, but far enough away that it would be highly unlikely to run into any family or friends. Seated across from him looking nervous were Dr. Ed Davison and Coach Philip Glenn. Mac Aldrich was a rising star in the DC world of influence. He was Princeton educated with deep Virginia roots dating back to the early 1700s. He was a junior partner at Lee, Hamilton and Fox, a prestigious lobbying firm that was known for getting results from both sides of the aisle. Rumor had it he was a shoo-in for full partner within 3 years. That would make him the youngest full partner in the history of L.H.F. Mike was also a huge supporter of the high school where his wife Beth worked. He helped get at-risk kids into tutoring, raised money for the sports and theater programs, and in general, supported the school in any way he could. Therefore, it wasn't a crazy notion to either Davidson or Glenn that Mike wanted to chat. It was the fact that he wanted to meet with just the two of them alone. While slightly anxious, they thought perhaps he was flying out of Dulles later, and this made for a convenient spot to connect. However, they were about to learn the true nature of the topic, and it had nothing to do with proximity to the airport. Although nervous, Davison and Glenn had plopped down in the booth with Mike. They greeted him cordially, but noticed he didn't stand to shake their hands. "Have a seat, gentlemen," he offered, waving the server over. "What are you drinking?" "It's on me." Davidson ordered a Coors Light, while Glenn asked for a Michelob Ultra. While they waited, Mike decided to introduce the topic of conversation by sliding his cell phone to the middle of the table. "Watch this," he said. "It is a shortened recording of a longer one that runs about an hour. This is only 90 seconds. The first part of the clip began with a shot of Beth Eldridge on her knees in Davidson's office. He held the back of her head and she worked hard on his engorged clock. The sound was low, but the dialogue and other noises were discernible. As the shot scanned back, the clock could be seen on the wall. It read 6:30 p.m. "She was all," Davidson whispered in a shocked voice. The scene was cut, and the next angle was Beth bent over her principal's desk. Her skirt well up over her hips, blouse and bra discarded on the floor. Where her panties were, was anybody's guess. As at Davidson ducks Beth on the small screen, Glenn was already sweating. He knew what was coming next. The scene was his office. It was dimly lit. Obviously late at night. From the view on the screen, he knew it was a Friday night about 3 weeks ago after a huge win against a crosstown rival. He remembered Beth had sent Mike home after the game, claiming it was her turn for cleanup duty. This shot was even more damning. The clip ran for another 15 seconds, long enough to see Mike's whore wife Beth be filled with Coach Glenn's cum as she climaxed with a shriek. He wasn't wearing a condom. Neither had. Mike cut it off and the server brought the beers. "Mike, listen," Glenn began. "Shut the duck up, you piece of garbage." And you, Mike growled, pointing his finger in the principal's face, doing everything he could to remain calm. "Don't you say a ducking word either." Aldridge continued, "What did I ever do to either of you to be treated with such disrespect? Clearly, my wife is a slut, but neither of you had to agree to her betrayal. You could have walked away. I wouldn't expect you to call me or warn me, that would be presumptuous. But that's a far cry from ducking my wife and belittling me in the process." Neither man could make eye contact. Mike continued. "I have no doubts from what I've learned that she ducked you first, Coach. That's bad enough, but you, Ed, forcing her to duck you for your silence is beyond contemptible. It turns out my loving, faithful wife is neither loving nor faithful. I'll deal with her in my own time and way, but right now I'm taking care of business with the two of you." Both men now looked startled. Each were very public figures with well-paying, respected jobs. Both were in their early 40s, in the middle of their careers. Each was also married, Glenn with 2 kids, one a senior and the other a freshman at the high school. Davidson's 3 were younger, the oldest going into middle school. The stakes couldn't be higher as both realized the man across the table held all the cards. "Don't think for a second I'm going to take pity on either of you. I'm here to tell you what is going to happen. At least I'm giving you fair warning about the troubles ahead, something neither of you even considered for me. Davidson, you first. You're out of education for good. I don't give a rat's as what you do or where you go, but you're resigning, effective the end of the semester. That gives you 6 weeks to figure your sheet out. I had about 2 minutes before my world came crashing down, so don't even think of telling me I'm being arbitrary or unfair. By next Monday I want to hear about your resignation from everyone in the school district. I want my phone blowing up with texts, 'Did you hear about Principal Davidson?' On top of that, your lovely wife Cheryl is going to find out what a piece of shit she married. By the time you get home she will have received a package with the irrefutable evidence of you ducking Beth in your office, on your couch, and over your desk. I bet you've ducked Cheryl there before, since most couples play those kinds of kinky games now and then. Enjoy explaining to her how she wasn't enough, and you needed to go looking for extracurricular tail." "Mike, please," the now tearful Davidson tried to interject. "I told you to shut the duck up," Mike hissed. "You didn't care about me, so I'm only treating you with the same friendship you showed me." Ed just hung his head. At this point Glenn saw the handwriting on the wall. "Don't try to pull that sheet with me, Aldridge. I'll duck and kill you. Don't even think of ducking with me or my family." Mike paused for a moment, trying not to laugh or explode in rage. "Coach, I know you were a big stud NCAA football player back in the day, and think you're still one tough mother ducker. But those days are long gone, and if you want, let's go out into the parking lot right now, take off our jackets and go at it. I promise you I'll kick the ever-loving shit out of you, and then drag you home and dump you on the doorstep, so your wife can get in a few licks, and your kids can see their big tough daddy coach beaten to a pulp. Truth be told, I'd like nothing more than for you to try me." Something in Mike's voice and look caused Phil Glenn to pause. Mike went on. "Same goes for you, Coach. You're out. However, you're out now. You're going to give this piece of shit your resignation letter over the weekend. I know your team is stacked this full, and I'm not giving you the chance to win a regional or state title and go out on top. I don't care what the duck kind of excuse you make up, but you leave the school now. Just to be clear, if either of you don't do as I say, everyone, school board, faculty, extended family and as many people in the community I know will have these videos before you can blink. I have two very tech-savvy friends who owe me favors working on the distribution lists even as we speak. Furthermore, if anything should befall me in the next several years, I've left very specific instructions to bring more sheet in your lives than you can imagine. Just to prove I'm not bluffing, listen to this. He then held up his phone, and the three heard Coach Glenn's words. Don't try to pull that sheet with me, Aldrich. I'll duck and kill you. Glenn's jaw dropped open. You two duckers are dumber than rocks. How the hell did you get this far in life being complete morons? Do you think I'd walk in here unprepared? Did you assume if you threatened me, I'd just roll over and become some sissy wimp cluck? By the way, just to add a little icing on the cake, Davidson, I have you on tape ducking Mrs. Michaels from the science department, and you Glenn rolling around with Tina McVeigh, who just graduated last year. Ed, do you know Bob Michaels? Sergeant Major Bob Michaels, 1st Recon Battalion, 1st Marine Division. I promise you he won't be as nice as me. Turning back to Glenn, and you dumb duck, I'm sure Senator McVeigh from the great state of New York knows lots of folks that would help him take care of some sick perv who seduced and deflowered his sweet little girl. Mike Aldrich rose from his seat and threw two 20s on the table. Any questions, gentlemen? He was met with nothing but silence. Good. Enjoy your beers, they're on me. He turned and left. 10 minutes later, as the two men stumbled out of O'Malley's, each of their wives received a FedEx package. The comfortable lives they both knew and enjoyed came to a screeching halt. On his way home, he dialed one more number. When it was answered, he offered one word and hung up. Go. In the next 24 hours, the sergeant major was going to learn of his wife's betrayal. Mike had done a bit of background on him. Kid from the wrong side of town, worked his ass off, made something of his life, and was an honorable man. He served with distinction. He deserved the truth. Aldrich was thankful the Marines' kids were grown and out of the house. It was small consolation, but it was something. He felt no compunction to contact the senator. He probably already knew his little girl was not a princess clothed in white. Now for his wife. Beth Aldrich was at home relaxing with a glass of wine after a long week of school. Mid-October was always a tough time. The newness of the year had worn off, and Christmas break was still 2 months out. She was looking forward to a weekend with her husband doing some yard work, visiting the farmer's market, and maybe getting started a little early on expanding their family. That brought a smile to her face. Beth truly believed she loved Mike. They met on a blind date 7 years ago, and she was immediately smitten. Tall with a rugged build and a caring heart, she knew he was a quality guy. He waited all of 15 minutes after their first date to call her and ask her for a second. At first, she thought she'd let him stew and not answer, but the thought he might not call back struck a sudden fear in her that surprised her. She picked up on the third ring. They dated casually for about a month, then became exclusive. Mike didn't try to duck her right away. She realized fidelity and respect were important to him. Their first kiss was tentative because Mike didn't want to assume. For a brilliant guy, he sure is bad at picking up on signs, Beth thought before launching herself into his arms. 5 months later, word on the street was Mike had a ring. Beth had her spies and was trying to hide her excitement, but when Mike took her to Fiola, one of DC's 5-star restaurants, she could hardly contain her excitement. On one knee just after dessert, Mike asked Beth to be his wife. The entire crowd must have been clued in because they all rose and drank a toast to marriage, happiness, and long life. Beth always smiled when she thought of that night. Mike wanted to wait to make love to Beth until the honeymoon, not because he was some uptight celibate guy, but because he wanted Beth to know she was more than special. She was the only woman he would ever love. Their sexual relationship was simply an extension of his deep commitment to her. He slept with a handful of women along the way, but he was now for her alone and thought waiting until the nuptials would be the right thing to do. He was that kind of guy. A month before the wedding, the prenup was signed. Mike was crystal clear where he stood on fidelity and commitment. There would be no reward for cheating. If either party betrayed the other, they would leave the marriage with very, very little. Mike came from wealth, Beth not as much, but Mike insisted he be held to the same standard as his bride. The wedding bells chimed, their honeymoon in France was magical, and the first 6 years of their marriage was better than most. They had a spat from time to time, but mainly Mike was busy showing Beth how much he cherished her, and Beth was busy making sure her man knew she adored and respected him. As Beth sat on the couch thinking of this, her guilt began to eat away at her. What was it that made her duck two men who cared nothing for her other than as a casual co-worker? Why would she let these men take her so roughly and use her as their personal duck toy? And why married men with wives and kids? Beth didn't know where the itch came from, and didn't bother to explore it via a confidential friend or perhaps even counseling. Instead, every so often she'd make herself available to Coach Glenn or Dr. Davison. Always on off hours, always with a rock-solid alibi, but always at the school. It was so wicked to be spanked and ducked over the principal's desk or to be taken in the boys' locker room late on a Friday after a football game. 2 weeks ago, she even contemplated letting both have her at once. There was a work conference coming up in January over the MLK holiday weekend. It was in Dallas and all three were attending without spouses. She thought about the looks on their faces if they entered a room together and found her in one of Mike's Princeton t-shirts and skimpy panties. Making sure Mike was somehow dissed in the process was always part of the game. Again, she didn't know why it was important to her, but it made her wet just thinking about it. She got off twice in the tub the last 2 weeks focusing on this fantasy. But on nights like tonight, she was conflicted. Mike was amazing. Why would she risk his love over cheap and ultimately worthless sex? 3 months earlier Beth had a health scare. It turned out to be only tonsillitis, and she spent a night in the hospital after surgery. Mike had been there for her. Loving her, caring for her, cherishing her as he always did. Neither of her duck buddies could even be bothered to send a get well text. She knew she was a fool, but she also knew she wouldn't stop. Her thoughts were interrupted by the front door to their condo opening. Mike walked in. Beth knew immediately something was off. She got up to greet him with a hug and kiss. "Hey baby, how was your day? Was it okay?" Mike held her off, something he'd never done. "No, Beth, no hug. I had a shitty day. I've had lots of them lately, but I haven't been ready to talk to you about them until now. Why don't we sit down at the kitchen table?" Mike turned away and retrieved a bottle of water from the fridge. No alcohol during this conversation. Beth followed him looking very concerned. It never dawned on her that her husband could know of her slut ways or that her marriage, along with the life she enjoyed, hung by a thread. "What is it, Mike? You're scaring me, sweetie." For his part, Mike pulled out a chair and slumped down. The simple act of unscrewing the cap and taking a drink felt hard to him at this moment. The shock had worn off over the last several weeks, as he processed his wife's betrayal, but the weight of sadness, anger and confusion continued to be a burden that was almost too much to bear. "Beth, is there anything you want to share with me? Anything at all?" "What do you mean, Mike? What would I have to share? Clearly, you're upset, but I don't have a clue as to why. Tell me what's going on, so I know how to help you, baby." Mike deeply sighed. Right out of the cheater's handbook. Show surprise and be unaware of anything you've done that could be hurtful. He knew she'd probably start there, and he was prepared to give her a second chance to come clean. If she did, he believed there may be a sliver of hope for their marriage. "Beth, please, think carefully and honestly. Is there anything you need to tell me about how you are treating our marriage?" Beth blew right through the second invitation as well. "Mike, honestly, I have no idea what you are referring to. I love you with all my heart. I love our marriage and our life together. I can't wait to start having babies with you, raising them, and growing old together." At this point she reached out to hold his hands. The look on Mike's face was one of reluctant acceptance as he pulled back. "Don't, Beth," he said in a resigned tone. "Don't touch me." Tears were now welling up in her eyes. "Mike, what on earth is going on? Please talk to me. Please tell me." Mike reached into his pocket and pulled out his cell phone. He punched a couple of buttons, and as he set the phone in the middle of the table he said in a subdued tone, Beth, this is what is going on." He hit play. Beth saw and heard her voice begging Philip Glenn to duck her hard. Beth shrieked, "No." Before she could react further, Mike picked his phone up and hit stop. Beth was sobbing with her face in her hands. "Beth, look at me." She just continued to sob as she began to rock back and forth, choking on her tears. "Beth," Mike said again in a loud and commanding voice. "Look at me right ducking now." It wasn't clear if Beth looked up abruptly because Mike had never spoken to her in that tone of voice, or if his volume simply brought her back to reality. Whatever the case, she looked up. "Before we go on, you should know I have similar clips of you and Dad Davison." Beth's eyes were now wide with horror. "No, Mike, please no," was all she could muster. "Beth, I'm going out for an hour to take a walk. You need time to compose yourself," since this revelation was clearly a shock out of the blue. She started to protest, but he held up his hand. "I'm not leaving, Beth. I'm just giving you space to get your feet under you. When I get back, we can talk if you like, or I can give you a day or two since we have the weekend. I'll insist we have a conversation by Sunday afternoon, but until then it will be up to you when we talk." With that, Mike went upstairs and changed into his sweats, one of his old Princeton sweatshirts, and an ancient my ball cap he'd had for over 20 years. Something about that old cap gave him some sense of calm. When he came back through the kitchen and headed out the door, Beth was still sitting in the kitchen now, quietly crying. Mike walked through their neighborhood and to a local park that had a 2-mile-long path. It had some good hills, so he got his blood going a bit. As he walked, a wide range of somewhat random but connected thoughts went through his brain. Will she lead with all the cliches? Will she hurt herself while I'm gone? How will family and friends react for when they find out? I really hope Davison and Glenn's spouses are in the process of kicking them to the curb. His walk turned into a run, and by the time he headed back home an hour later he'd done 6 miles. He was physically tired, but his mind felt better. It felt cleared. As he came through the side door into the kitchen, Beth was gone. He had a moment of fear, but he heard the shower running and was glad his wife was up and moving. He took a quick shower in the guest bath and was waiting for her in the kitchen when she returned. She stopped and fixed on him for a moment. His eyes were just as blue as they had always been, but had they lost some of their kindness? Was there now an edge, or was it just her imagination? She grabbed some water and sat across from him. "Mike, thank you for giving me some time to regroup. You could have just launched into me, and you had a right to do so. I appreciate you giving me some time so we can talk. You're being kinder than I would be if the roles were reversed." Mike nodded but said nothing. "I'd like to talk a bit now if that is okay with you." Again, he only nodded in reply. "I know you probably don't believe me, but I love you deeply. I have no feeling for either of these men, and honestly, I have no idea what drives me to this behavior. It only happens every other month or so, but when the urge hits me, I feel out of control to stop until I've acted upon it. I guess that sounds like an addiction, maybe it is, but it has no bearing on my feelings for you." Mike, still silent, continued to listen. "I wasn't abused as a child or teenager. There is no family skeleton of some crazy uncle who molested me. I did have a couple of boyfriends back in college who were a bit rough, but nothing weird or abnormal. But even before I met you, every so often I just needed to be ducked hard and used by someone who was just there for their own pleasure." At this point Beth paused. When Mike said nothing, she asked, "Mike, could you respond to what I've said? It will help me to know what you're thinking." Mike sighed. "Beth, I know you truly believe you love me. I don't doubt the sincerity of your words. However, forgive me if I don't believe you. Love means being committed to being together. Until I saw the evidence of your betrayal and heard it from your own mouth now, I never knew this side of you. How can you hide something this huge from a person you claim to love? I'm glad you were never abused, but you've abused me and abused my trust. My commitment to you. Let me ask you, have you ever talked with someone about your urges? Have you ever sought some help to figure it out, even if you were unwilling to talk with me?" "No, Mike, I haven't. I guess I was too embarrassed to see a counselor and say, 'Can you help me figure out why every 6 weeks or so I need to be a complete slut with someone who isn't my husband?' Surely, you can see how hard that would be." Of course, it would be hard, and I guess a bit demeaning, but wouldn't genuine love make it worth it? Wouldn't loving your spouse drive you to find answers that would build up your marriage instead of destroying it? Is that what I've done, Mike? Have I destroyed our marriage? Have I ruined your love for me? What do you think, Beth? You've already told me you'd have no love for, or patience with me if the shoe was on the other foot. Now you're looking for me to carry the load for you. How long will it be before you find somebody besides Davidson or Glenn and we're right back where we started? How do I know they were the only guys who ducked you like a slut? Have there been others, Beth?" Beth didn't reply, she just hung her head. "Duck me," sighed Mike. "I don't want details, Beth, but how many and how long? I think I have the right to know since I need to go to my doctor and get checked for sexually transmitted diseases. Nobody while we were engaged or during the first year of our marriage. I believed I'd left it behind, but my first year teaching it came back with a vengeance. I've had 2 other men before Ed and Phil over a 3-year period. So, 4 of the 6 years we've been married." "Yes." Mike got up and headed for the door. "Mike, please, you said we could talk. I need you to be with me, to listen and hold me. I need you to promise we will work through this." "Sorry, Beth, no promises. Not now, and I don't know, maybe not ever. Truth and promises mean nothing to you when it comes to me. Don't ask me to do something you never intended to do yourself. If you need a boy toy, I'm sure you'll have no trouble finding someone to help ease your pain." Beth flinched at this. Mike was many things, but he'd never been cruel. "Mike, please, when will you be back?" Not a clue. And he was gone. Mike kept to himself for the next 2 days, ignoring Beth's texts for the rest of the weekend. He knew he'd need to take a couple of personal days in the next week, which was unheard of for him. However, he was confident his boss would work with him on this. He was known as a tough but fair-minded guy who always got shit done. He was of high value to his firm, so some leeway would not be an issue. Early in his career, he refused to do business with an Asian company because he knew they abused kids in their production warehouses. His boss was livid until Mike presented his case and offered to go next door to Helen Carnegie with his growing list of very satisfied clients. The Asian firm was told to take a hike. Mike wasn't naive or above pushing the edges, but he never violated his own code, and he kept his firm out of any public or private scandals more than once. Those who mistook his ethics for weakness soon learned otherwise. He could be ruthless when need be, but burying a competitor who was trying to do the same to him was a far cry from hurting innocent people. So, when Mike called asking for a few days away, his manager was happy to cut him some slack. Mike promised to be back no later than the next Monday, and assured Gail Sharp he was all over the Anderson deal. Monday afternoon, Beth begged Mike to come home and talk. He'd come back to the house on Saturday morning only to get some clothes and leave again. He'd waited until Beth ran to the store for some groceries. "Why should I come home, Beth? Please, Mike, please just come home so we can talk." Mike decided it would probably be wise to hear her out. An hour later, they were seated once again at the kitchen table. "I've done nothing but think about a solution all weekend, Mike. I think I have a good option for us, and I want to tell you about it." "That's rich, Beth. You never tell me before or after we're married about your little itch. You just stuck around behind my back with 4 different men. Then all on your own you determine a solution. No asking for input or asking me for my thoughts. Now you're going to tell me what we will do to compensate for you being a cheating slut. Damn it, Mike, I'm doing my best to try and be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. If you're just going to shoot me down, I don't know what to do." "Duck off, Beth. You have no right to get angry with me. Do you know, not once have you said how wrong you are for betraying me or hurting us. You have yet to offer anything remotely close to a sincere apology, based on understanding the depth of your betrayal. So, excuse the duck out of me if I'm not interested in how you're going to repair everything before showing me even an ounce of sorrow and remorse for what you did. I saw the pain on your face at getting caught, but nothing based on shame or regret for causing deep anguish to my heart and soul. But I do want to fix it, Mike. I am ashamed of my actions and the pain they've caused. Maybe I haven't expressed it right, but I do feel all those things. Haven't you ever stumbled over your words?" "Of course, Beth, but we say what we believe or what we want believed. You want me to believe your sorrow is genuine and you will change your ways. I don't doubt your sincerity about that. But I refuse to be taken in by words that have never included admitting guilt or asking for forgiveness. It is clear you want the pain to stop, and you want us to continue. What is also clear, however, is that you want to gloss over your corruption of our relationship. So where do we go from here, Mike? Beth, I think you should think about a solution that works for you, and I'll do the same for me." "I don't like that, Mike. That sounds ominous for us. I didn't like finding out my wife gets an itch she won't ask me to scratch, and becomes a whore for other men, Beth. I guess we should both get used to disappointment." With that, he once again left his home. Mike wasn't sulking. He was hurting for sure. He loved Beth, not perfectly, but certainly as best he could. He believed that she genuinely returned his love, so this revelation was a blow below the belt. He spent a great deal of time playing a wide range of scenarios over and over in his mind. Normally, he and Beth would discuss big decisions. He always valued her thoughtfulness and wisdom. But her betrayal changed all that in the blink of an eye. He was on his own. In the end, he boiled it down to 4 options. 1. Ask Beth to get some serious help and see if she could come around so they could stay married. The upside was little to no public turmoil. The downside was he could never truly trust her to keep her word or her legs closed, no matter how sincere she may be about change. Also, he'd always know she played him for a fool. Once a guy in his line of work was okay with that, he may as well paint a bullseye on his chest. 2. Make her do penance. Demand she give him hall pass for as long as she'd been ducking around. But Mike didn't want to duck anybody else, and this would make him no better than her. 3. Take a break for 6 months via legal separation and see where they landed at the end of that time. But Beth would never remain celibate, and he had no desire to force her to or take the time to check up on her. 4. Only one good option. Their relationship would end, and Beth must pay for her sins. It needed to be quiet and out of the public eye, but she would remember every day for the rest of her life she lied, cheated, and betrayed with no more thought than it took to choose apples over oranges. For the rest of the week, Mike quietly outlined his plan. Then he turned it over again and again, looking for errors, loopholes, or blatant mistakes. He made a few very discreet phone calls in the process, and had one very serious face-to-face meeting with a man who owed him an enormous favor, and was only too happy to repay, once he heard Mike's explanation. While busy plotting his revenge, Mike heard through the grapevine that Principal Davidson and Coach Glenn had not only stepped down, but each was headed to divorce court. The details were sketchy, and nobody was naming names, but it was clear to a discerning eye that both men had dipped their wicks outside their marriage bed, and were paying the price. On Thursday evening, Mike put in a call to Gail. "Boss, I'm headed up to Nick in the morning to meet with the Anderson folks. I'll be there all day, but before the weekend we'll have a solution that works for everyone." "Sounds good, Mike. You always come through and I appreciate it. All the partners do. Anything about your time away I need to know about? You okay?" "I'm good, boss, although there were a tough few days. Thanks for understanding." Mike flew to Nick, and from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m., he was engaged with the Anderson team. As promised, when he left he had everything ironed out and a signed contract in his satchel. Back in Virginia, Beth had taken the week off from school. She was a mess, but after a day or two began to get back to somewhat of a routine. Normally 2 or 3 days per week she would take a run at the park where Mike had burned off steam the week before. The 2-mile loop had no cameras except at the parking lot. Later, when the police got a search warrant to review the tape, they saw Beth entering the park around 10 a.m. on a run. Over the next 8 hours of recording, she never emerged. In fact, when the forensics team fast-forwarded the digital tapes for another 24 hours, they found she never came back into view. Mike caught a flight back to Reagan, picked up his car and headed home. Once at home he showered, had a light dinner along with a beer. At 8 p.m. local time he put on his headphones and fired up an untraceable laptop, which had been placed in his bag at LaGuardia by an expert whose actions went completely undetected by surveillance cameras. Later that night, the man reappeared in Mike's backyard and took possession of said laptop. Neither the man nor the computer were ever seen in those parts again. When he fired up the screen he was greeted with a picture of a very worried-looking Beth. She was dressed in her running outfit, but her hands were cuffed to the table in front of her. It was clear from her surroundings she was on a private plane. When she saw Mike she burst into tears. "Mike, please tell me what's happening. I'm scared. Who are these men?" "Beth, this is my solution to the problem of your betrayal, lies and deception. I told you. You should come up with a plan for you. It would appear mine was ready before yours." "What can this be, Mike? Are you sending me away somewhere for a while so you can duck around on me? I'll let you have your fun. I owe you that. There is no need to have me abducted. Please tell them to bring me home." "Sorry, Beth, no can do. You see, I sold you to these men. You belong to them. They paid good cash money for you. See, I have it here." Mike held up a $100 bill. "Sold me? What do you mean? You don't owe me. I'm not your slave. I demand you have these men release me." Beth's voice was going up several octaves every time she spoke, as she edged closer and closer to sheer panic. "Well, Beth, in these men's culture, I do own you, and I have every right to sell you if you fail me. I'd say ducking other men behind my back was an epic failure on your part, wouldn't you?" "But Mike," he cut her off. "Beth, shut up and listen. You crushed me on such a deep level, I may not ever be able to trust a human being. You clucked me as if I was a sissy wimp. You lied, deceived, betrayed, and made a mockery of my love for you. In short, you broke me. Now I'm going to return the favor and break you. As the French say, c'est serial impitoyable, mon amour." "No, Mike, you can't. Please forgive me. Please let me come home." "I'm sorry, my sweet, but you are going to your new home. These men are part of an Eastern European conglomerate that owns whorehouses in 6 different countries. I have no idea to which location they are taking you. But I thought since you love giving yourself to men who don't love you and just want to use you, I'd help you find your dream job. They own you. You work for them now, and if I understand it correctly, 4 to 6 times per day you'll have the opportunity to get just what you want." "No," Beth shrieked. One of the men backhanded her across the face. "Quiet down, witch, or I'll throw you out of this plane." "Beth, we only have a moment more. As I said, you destroyed my love and deeply wounded my heart, so now you will reap what you've sown. People will surely miss you. I'm quite certain your mom and dad will be heartbroken that they will never see you again. But nobody will come to your rescue. You will never leave your new home alive. These men are impeccable at what they do, and they've left no trace. You are now their whore to use as they wish." Matt concluded, "Beth, you should know one more thing. People coming out of anesthesia after surgery sometimes reveal the darndest things." There was a brief pause before the screen went blank. It was just enough time for Mike to see it dawn on Beth how Mike had discovered her secret. She had told him herself. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Beth had slumped over and was quietly crying. However, she was about to learn just what her new life would be. One of the 3 men in the cabin gave the others a sinister grin and said in Russian, "Well, boys, how about we try out our recent purchase?" Beth began her new job. Epilogue. In the days ahead, Mike reported Beth missing. The police did a thorough investigation for over 2 years, before admitting the case had 0 leads. Mike was interrogated several times, but there was no evidence linking him to his wife's disappearance. The LH&F legal team took good care of him. While the case is still active, Mike is free and clear of any charges. He continues to enjoy significant success in his work. He doesn't date. Beth has never been seen or heard from again. Dr. Davison drives a UPS truck in Charleston, West Virginia, and Coach Glenn owns a rundown convenience store in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Both lost almost everything in their divorces and rarely saw their kids. Both wives remarried. That's it for today. If you enjoyed today's story, drop a like and comment before you leave. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any video. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you soon for our next story.